Happy New Year, everybody, and Tony here with my review of the Philharmonie Berlin's New Year's concert, which was shown last night at the Philharmonie Berlin. The conductor was Justin Doyle, the soloists were lyric soprano Johanna Winkel, mezzo-soprano Sophie Harmsen, light lyric tenor Patrick Graal, bass baritone Andreas Wolff, and the chorus and orchestra were RIAS Kammerchor Berlin and the Akademie für Alte Musik Berlin, with compositions done by Francesco Durante, Enrico Albicastro, and Georg Friedrich Händel. This concert was really special for me because this has been a long time since I last did a live music review. The last time I ever did reviews of this ilk was last year when I reviewed the Deutsche Oper Berlin's lead concert starring Alexandra Hutton, Karis Tucker, Clemens Bieber, and Byung-Gil Kim. Secondly, this was the first time that I heard compositions by Francesco Durante and Enrico Albicastro, who were also Baroque composers. Although I've heard many works by Georg Friedrich Händel, known in England as George Frederick Händel, I have never come across Francesco Durante's and Enrico Albicastro's works until last night. Thirdly, this concert's theme revolves around composers who did their works in Rome and Naples, considering that these two Italian cities were also the hubs for music and art. Finally, I would love to dedicate this review to one of the members of the RIAS Kammerchor Berlin, bass baritone Jonathan de la Paz Thaens. So Jonathan, if you are watching this, I wish you and your colleagues fortitude, abundance, and prosperity in this new year of 2022. With that said, let's get on with the review. The concert started off with Francesco Durante's Magnificat, and just by listening to how this concert opened, I was immediately immersed into what this particular opener did. This was a wonderful opener considering that the Magnificat is in B major because this was energetic. The orchestra was able to be alive and it was able to help us, listeners and viewers, thoroughly engage with what was going to occur within the next few hours. And this was also the very first time since I heard a piece by Francesco Durante. This was also helped by how the RIAS Kammerchor Berlin and the Akademie für Alte Musik Berlin were able to work together to bring this particular piece of music to life. And I also decree that Durante's music as well as Albicastro's music definitely need to be rediscovered because these composers are rarely performed, and it was really wonderful to see the Berliner Philharmonie include this in their repertoire. Speaking of Enrico Albicastro, there was also the orchestral piece, which was the Concerto Grosso in G minor. The tempi were precise and accurate, and they also brought in a sense of vivacity, all thanks to how Justin Doyle managed the orchestra and how they managed to work together to bring Albicastro's piece of music to life. But the highlights for me were not only Francesco Durante's Magnificat, but also Georg Friedrich Händel's Nisi Dominus and Dixit Dominus. Worth mentioning in Händel's Dixit Dominus is the Judicabit in nationibus implemit ruinas, in which Händel made use of counterpoint in order to designate who sings in soprano, who sings in alto, and then tenor, and then bass, thus making everything work in not only harmony, but also with precise timing. And when you have four soloists who are able to do just as well as the chorus did, you definitely had an evening that was quite worthwhile and brought sufficient interest. Starting off with lyric soprano Johanna Winkel, I was quite impressed with the repertoire that she had. Not only did she seem to specialize in Baroque music, but also roles such as Donna Elvira, Mimi, Pamina, and Agata. Furthermore, I was also quite intrigued with how long her career was, considering that she started singing back in the mid-2000s and is still going quite strong today. Based on what I managed to hear last night, I thought she had a lovely lyric soprano instrument. Although the timbre of her voice was quite pleasing to listen to, there were moments in which her chest tones weren't really as full or rich. And there were also times that her bottom notes did sound quite hollow. Regardless, she was able to put that vocal instrument of hers to fine use, and once she continues to develop her lyric soprano voice, I can sense a future in her in roles such as Valentine from Les Huguenots, the Marschallin from the Rosenkavalier, Yenufa, and Katya Kabanova. This is a lyric soprano I would love to continue seeing grow from strength to strength, and that instrument of hers definitely has potential to keep on blooming from top to bottom. Sophie Harmsen was also quite good. Yes, she also had a pleasing timbre. Her middle and high notes were solid all around. However, her chest tones tended to suffer on some occasions. There were times they suffered because they sounded rather hollow and not so cavernous, let alone as chesty as I would love for any mezzo-soprano to sound like. Sure, when it comes to mezzo-sopranos, I do have in my ears Guerrina Fabri, Eugenia Mantelli, and many of the other great mezzo-sopranos of the past. And I'm sure that if Sophie Harmsen continues to develop those chest tones and make them as fuller and stronger as ever before, we'll definitely have a fine mezzo who could be able to conquer the world stage and therefore continue to make her instrument bloom and grow in strength. The material that Miss Harmsen has is there, but I'm sure that with a lot more further activation in terms of head voice and chest voice, as well as participating these two, especially the chest tones, we'll definitely have at our disposal one of the finest singers of today. As she was last night, she was still quite good, but as I stated before, she could sound a whole lot stronger and a whole lot fuller when she continues to develop her technique in the right way. I was quite intrigued to see Patrick Graal as the tenor soloist because from what I heard last night, he had a nice light lyric tenor instrument. He has a decent tone and he definitely has potential to keep on growing as a fine light lyric tenor. In fact, if he continues working on his instrument, I'm pretty sure that he could even emulate Fritz Wunderlich and many of the other great Germanic lyric tenors of the past, but most especially Fritz Wunderlich. I hear a sound right there that is somewhat reminiscent of Wunderlich's musicality and how much he was able to express his voice in a way that was technical. But one thing that was kind of missing there was the sense of emotional abandon. Regardless, Patrick Graal was still a very fine tenor with a beautiful future ahead of him, and I'd love to see him grow because there is so much potential in Patrick Graal to keep on growing as a fine lyric tenor. I'm sure that he has a lot to learn from the likes of Walter Ludwig, Rudolf Schock, and of course Fritz Wunderlich. But based on what I heard from his voice last night, once he continues to develop that technique, I'm sure that his voice will be on par with Fritz Wunderlich's musicality and absolute expressionism, so long as he continues to develop his technique and continue strengthening his voice in the right way. Out of all the soloists, I have to say that I was quite impressed with Andreas Wolff. He has a strong baritone voice, and although he doesn't sound like a typical bass baritone because he tends to be on the lighter side, there is definitely a strong baritone voice there, considering that he's got some really nice low notes, as well as a timbre that might not be overly rich like real basses and real bass baritones, but it definitely shows potential for growth, richness, and depth. And he definitely stole the show that evening. His technical prowess and his ability to make those full low notes ring in his own special way was really commendable, despite not bearing the typical quality I would associate with in terms of a bass baritone, let alone a bass. So when all is said and done, the singing from Johanna Winkel, Sophie Harmsen, Patrick Graal, and Andreas Wolff was quite good. Andreas Wolff definitely stole the show that evening. But that's not to say that his other three colleagues weren't as great as he was. They were good, but I do not want to see them squandering their talent because these three also have a lot of potential to keep on growing in their crafts as singers. And there are brilliant futures for each and every one of them. So here's hoping that 2022 will be a year for further encouragement as well as further strength in their careers. And the conducting done by Justin Doyle was really fabulous all around. He definitely whipped that orchestra to great shape as well as the chorus, and he made sure that everybody from the soloists to the orchestra to the chorus went together in syncopation and harmony. And what more can you expect from the Akademie für Alte Musik Berlin as well as the RIAS Kammerchor Berlin? Each and every one of the members did so fabulously in their duties as musicians and as singers, for they were able to not only pay close attention to the score, but they were able to work together in a way that managed to make the music come alive. Whether it be the vocal music or the orchestral music, they did not disappoint whatsoever. I continue to salute their efforts. And here's hoping that they will have a lot of strong performances to come in the future. So overall, this was definitely a fine way for the Philharmonie Berlin to open the new year of 2022 with some really interesting pieces that I've never heard of before, even from well-known composers such as Georg Friedrich Händel, as well as some unknown composers such as Francesco Durante and Enrico Albicastro, as well as some fine singing from Johanna Winkel, Sophie Harmsen, Patrick Grall, and especially Andreas Wolff. And let us not forget about the fine orchestra playing by the Akademie für Alte Musik Berlin, as well as some equally wonderful singing by the RIAS Kammerchor Berlin. Last night's New Year's concert at the Philharmonie Berlin was quite the treat, and it was a welcome way to enter this new year despite the ongoing pandemic. And for those of you who caught last night's New Year's concert at the Philharmonie Berlin, what'd you think of it? Were you really pleasantly surprised to have heard music composed by Francesco Durante and Enrico Albicastro, and was the first time you heard their pieces? Was it also the first time that you also heard a couple of Handel's music, whether it be Dixit Dominus or Nisi Dominus? Was there a soloist you particularly liked and enjoyed, whether it was Johanna Winkel, Sophie Harmsen, Patrick Grall, and or Andreas Wolff? And do you believe that each of them have potential to keep on growing as singers? Or you think that one of them stands out? Or was there a particular part of this concert that you were not a fan of? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's it for my review of the Berliner Philharmonie's New Year's concert. Tune in much later where I finally do my tribute to Will Smith's and Janet Hubert's reconciliation at their Red Table Talk. So until then, Happy New Year, everybody!